Trademark is a name which identifies an individual or a group and is entitled to legal protection. The Beatles is a perfect example of a trademark. The name U2 is not the name of the individuals in a band; it's the name of a band. And sometimes people will use the trademark against the interests of the owner of the trademark to deceive the public and to create an impression that the wrongdoer's conduct is authorized by or somehow affiliated or supported by affiliated with or supported by the owner of the mark. I'll give you an example. There was a record called U2 Negative Land, and what it was a band called Negative Land, which came out with a parody of I Still Haven't Found What I'm Looking For by U2. But they packaged it, the record company, SST Records, packaged it to look like a U2 album. And again, the name of the band was Negative Land. The name of the album was U2, but the way they packaged it is on the spine it said U2 and then it said Negative Land. Now, ordinarily, by custom, you have the name of a band and then the name of the album, or the CD, right? So it looked like this was a new album by U2 called Negative Land. It didn't look like it was an album by Negative Land called U2. So it was deceptive in its packaging. And and this was released right before U2 had released an album called Achtung Baby. Now, U2 had not released an album for 5 years, and there was a tremendous amount of publicity leading up to the release of the album. And it's coming, and they're finishing it, it's going to be out in September and so on. And right before that album came out, and nobody knew the name of the album, out on the shelves comes U2 Negative Land, and people were buying this thing. Right? So we were able to stop, got an injunction. And the argument that the defendant made is, but the content is a parody. The parody was poking fun at U2, and it was poking fun at U2. And parody is protected by the First Amendment. Therefore, we should not be able to get an injunction to stop a parody, because the First Amendment prevents injunctions to stop speech, right? And our answer was, we don't particularly care what was in the album. We care about the way it was packaged and how consumers saw it, that it was deceptive to consumers. It created the impression that this was a false impression, that this was a U2 recording, an authorized U2 recording, and it was anything but. And it was because of the packaging that the album had to be taken off the shelves. And by that point, once it was gone, and they had to withdraw the album, and then we got the actual extraordinary number of albums, I don't remember what, they all got destroyed and so on, and that was the end of that. All right. But that's how trademark plays into the music world. There was, when the Beatles early on became hugely famous, there was an album that came out called Best of the Beatles. I wasn't involved in this case, but just to illustrate. Best of the Beatles. Well, you'd think that that was an album of the best songs of the Beatles. It wasn't. The first drummer for the Beatles was Pete Best. It wasn't Ringo Starr. And Pete Best did an album that had nothing to do with the Beatles. It was Best of the Beatles. It literally was Pete Best of the Beatles, right? So that got shut down very quickly. But that's an example of misleading advertising.